had a chest pain, and I was struggling with that pain, and I went to the doctor, and the doctor examined me, and it wasn't my physical health. So then I realised it must be my mental health that was causing the pain. And I had to address the symptoms because it was beginning to affect my life badly at that stage. And I felt that I was struggling to cope with it. And I kind of realised that if I let it go any longer, Sheila, that it would have affected my life badly, my work life, my family life. So I kind of had to try and get a grip on it, because it would leave me kind of having to rest in the evening, trying to calm down. And I suppose it was borderline on panic attacks at that stage. So I was quite lucky when I was at the doctor's office. I saw a poster on the wall and it had grow on it. And I suppose when I saw the word grow first, I thought of gardening or something. I thought it was, something that would kind of get you out of yourself a little bit. But when I contacted Grow, Ellen, the area coordinator at the time, spoke to me and told me to come to the meetings. They're a weekly meeting. And she said to give it 3 weeks before I drew any conclusions. Okay. And the members of the group were extremely welcoming. They were really warm and friendly. And from coming to that first meeting, I felt safe enough to start the process of peeling back the layers and finding out, well, what was causing this problem within me. I knew that I had a couple of chapters in my life that were quite stressful, but like this was 10 years later and I was still struggling with the pain in my chest. So with Grow, I learned that mental health cannot be taught, it has to be learned together. I connected with the other growers and we all supported each other. I was able to identify that the anxiety that had started to manifest in my body was caused by suppressed feelings that were inside of me for years and that had not been processed. And my body had kept score. My nervous system was kind of in overdrive, and my brain was sending out warning signals to my body, and I just couldn't shut them off. So as I said, there was 2 significant chapters in my life that occurred in my original family that had left me with open wounds. I was estranged from my original family. I was the middle child of 5 children, with an older sister and 3 brothers. And in 2005, my dad had got stomach cancer and he died in 2007. I loved Dad very much and I trusted him. Dad's passing for me wasn't complicated. I coped well grieving his loss. I accepted that he was very unwell. And I suppose we did a lot of grieving for Dad while he was still even living, because that's the way I'm afraid sadly cancer is. So I actually found that kind of the year after Dad passed away, I found that although I was grieving, I was happy to grieve his loss, and I don't know if that makes any sense. But for me, it wasn't complicated. I let him go within myself. So. But about a year or a few months before Dad passed away, he asked myself and my husband to take over the ownership of a site that he had in Gohor. We used it for family holidays. There was a couple of mobile homes on it. And this caused great stress within the family. After Dad died, there was several family meetings and, there was a lot of aggression and associated with all of that. And although my family were aware because Dad spoke to them, that he was leaving this 1 acre site to us, it still caused huge conflict and I didn't see it coming. I kind of felt I was very naive. I kind of looked through the world with rose tinted glasses maybe a little bit, and this completely blindsided me. And not only did it last for the period of time where the legalities of the site and all of that was being sorted out, that took 5 years. Those family difficulties, I suppose I asked myself the question, would they have manifested regardless of the issue of the site? Maybe the issue wasn't just the site, there were bigger issues at hand, I'm afraid. There was a lot of family dysfunction, sadly, and I suppose through Grow, I kind of learned that, the first thing I came to terms with was that estrangement. The area coordinator, and maybe after 3 or 4 months, I opened up completely about it, and she pulled me to one side and said to me, because I was extremely emotional and I kept feeling that I was going to break down and I was feeling very vulnerable, that when she pulled me one side, she kind of gave me just one amazing nugget of wisdom. She said to me to treat the loss as a permanent loss. Do you know, so I literally had to treat the loss as a bereavement. You know, similar to dad passing away, I had to treat my family as being permanently gone. And as much as hard as that is hard to hear, it was the turning point for me in terms of dealing with the estrangement. And she gave me the task of writing about it. And by writing about it, I was able to express myself in a way that wasn't this, you know, in the beginning I kind of felt very disloyal to my family because these family secrets are probably what caused the problem in the first place. You know, I think brushing things under the mat and under the carpet, it doesn't solve issues at all. Do you know, but by getting the task of writing about it, I had the freedom to express myself because those feelings had been suppressed in me for so long that they were bubbling up. And this was what was causing the anxiety within me and the emotional pain that was manifesting as physical pain. So I just thought that was tremendous. You know, for me, it was a light bulb moment. And from there, I kind of got stronger. And there was a wisdom in the one of the wisdoms in the Grow program says, however I came to be unwell, whoever is most to blame, it's my responsibility to recover. And that kind of empowered me because it gave me a sense of myself back to me and gave me a sense that, well, I am in control of my own life. Nobody else can control my life. Do you know what I mean? It's my life, and you know, I can make choices for myself, and therefore it was my responsibility to recover. And the part that really struck me too was that my children were, you know, my own children needed a man who was, you know, strong and happy and vibrant. And, you know, I didn't like this person who I had become, whereby I'd go to work in the morning and the sun would be shining and I'd be happy and I'd be thinking about my day ahead or whatever. And then my brain would go back there again. You know, my focus would drop and I just get that sinking feeling again in my stomach that, oh yeah, my circumstances aren't great, aren't they? You know what I mean? It kept going back to it again. But what happened was with that piece of information, by treating it as permanent loss, that was the key to it for me. That I was able to draw a line in the sand and just move on. Because I'm the type of person who likes to fix things. I couldn't fix it. There was no way I could fix it. So I had to let it go. And because I got stronger at that point, then it enabled me then to go and address the first chapter of my life that had caused me significant pain. And I suppose at that point, I realised that there's certain things that in a group setting, things can be quite difficult to bring up. Mm-hmm. And therefore, the group supported me in attending Pieta House for a number of weeks. It was my brother's 30th year anniversary. My own children were teenagers. And when I looked at my own children, it reminded me of, gosh, my brother at that age took his own life. You know, he was 16. I was 15 at the time. My other siblings were teenagers and children as well at the time. And back then, you know, nobody talked about what happened. You know, there was never a picture of my brother at home. Nobody visited the grave. It was just like, it was nearly as if he didn't exist. Wow. And for me, I had felt that I had carried his loss with me. And unlike Dad's passing, Dad's was uncomplicated. You know, I let Dad go immediately. But for me, Richard was different. And I couldn't even speak or talk about Richard myself without breaking down or having pain. So with Pieta House, they're skilled and experienced, and specifically with suicide and bereaved family members of suicide. And although that work was extremely hard, Grow taught me that the lowest ebb is the turning of the tide. Because at one point, I found that I didn't know whether to give up or to keep going. Do you know, and I'm not a quitter, but I found it really hard. I I worked 4 days a week. So on the Thursday that I was off, I attended the sessions, but on a Friday morning I was wrecked.
Yes.
It takes a lot out of you, because the pain you go through initially, you have to walk back out through that pain again to release it. So you really have to face the whole thing again, and there was a light bulb moment as well for me with Pieta House, as in the counsellor pointed out to me the level of abuse and alcoholism in the home, fueled a lot of the dysfunction within the family, sadly, and I was blinded to that. And in Grow, it tells you to seek the truth, and the truth will set you free. And that was just so true for me. The last session of at Pieta House, I drove home from where I was at, and there was a rainbow in the sky. And I was like floored by it. I was so delighted. And I said, I actually felt that work was completed. And even though I was probably at Pieta, I'd say it was probably for the guts of 6 months, I kept completely in contact with Grow, and the Grow family kept me included. They're a community that are so inclusive, on the social outings, which we call the 12 steps. They included me in all of those. They kept completely in touch with me. And I with them, as friends on a WhatsApp group. And I found that Grow to me was a sport, and I knew that I could return back to Grow as well after Pieta, to find my feet again, and to but I felt that my work was complete, and I know that step 11 says that we grow daily closer to maturity, and that's so true, because even since then, even though I felt the work was complete within me, you can always keep moving forward. Do you know what I mean? That you live your life one day at a time, with being daily closer to maturity.
Yes.
And, just to say to people as well that the journey is not linear. That you can have ups and downs. There's actually a great graph. I actually have it here in front of me in the book. I don't know if anybody can see that there.
Yeah, we
But
can.
you can see that the trajectory is generally upwards.
Yes.
But you can see there's a few dips and troughs throughout
Absolutely.
it.
Absolutely.
And to me, that was very much my own walk, because in the beginning, you kind of feel like, will I get better? It's not like a broken arm when you know that in 6 weeks the cast is coming off. When you have emotional or mental distress in your life, you can't really see the end point. You don't know the end point. And that's why Grow is brilliant with testimonies, because you can see other people's stories. And although every person's story is different, there will be a fragment of truth for you within that story that might shine a bit of light, and kind of, it might resonate with you.
Yes.
And it might send you on a different path. Do you know what I mean? And you'll learn an awful lot. And I suppose maturity in growth, there's 5 pillars. There's understanding, acceptance, confidence, control, and love. And you can't have acceptance without understanding. And I suppose for me, starting off and Grow was all about understanding, peeling back the layers, seeing where the problems were at. The understanding in Pieta as well was understanding abuse, alcoholism, the impacts on family dysfunction, all of those things. So you go through those different phases, and you eventually get to a place of love, and you move from maybe a place of hurt and damage to a place of forgiveness. I've completely forgiven myself, my family. Do you know what I mean? And I've let go now, thankfully, of the pain that I had, and let go of the hurt. And I think of my family very fondly. I pray for them, and I hope that they too are in a happy place. And sometimes you just need boundaries in your life as well, healthy boundaries. And to stay safe and to stay well. And another part of the Grow program that really helps me is the serenity prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And Grow certainly teaches us a lot about wisdom.
Yes.
With
Yes.
all the little wisdoms that they have.
Yeah.
I think there must be over 100 of them, Sheila, is there?
There probably is, yeah. And it's funny how what you say about everybody's story being different, and with this series of videos, everybody that I've spoken to has different wisdoms that resonated with them, or different light bulb moments in their journey of, where somebody said something in a meeting, or somebody used a wisdom, or as you say, where Ellen pointed, you to maybe looking at things with a permanent view. That's probably something that I've really picked up on when I've spoken to different people about their journeys with the Grow program, with peer support groups, that
Yeah.
just saying the right thing at the right time is so important for
Yeah.
somebody. And it's the thing that strikes me with speaking to you, Karina, and listening to your story is that piece that you say about having no ill will towards anybody. And I think that's so powerful, and it comes
Yeah.
across so well that you're at peace with so much. It's hard to even imagine the
Yeah.
person you describe with them, that when you said you were driving to work and you'd be in a good place and the weather was nice, and then you'd have that sinking feeling. Like, you just don't seem like that there's no trace of that at all anymore. So it's really, really great to see.
And I suppose we have to understand too that life will always be full of little tests and challenges or whatever,
Yes.
but it's our perception of them, really. Like, my circumstances never changed. Do you know what I mean? Like, the family is still estranged. Do you know, my brother obviously will not come back. Do you know, like,
Yes.
it's not so much that things in your life change; it's what changes within you. You know what I mean? As in your perception of it,
And your
and
acceptance.
it's growing, and the peer support, you know, and the program that
Yeah.
really help with
Yeah.
those things.
Yeah. And I think what you point out there about how the group, I suppose, encouraged you to go to Pieta House to have one-to-one counselling, and
Yeah,
then you did that journey with them kind of around you all the time, and then
absolutely, yeah,
came back to Grow. And you're very much the reason, I suppose, that I see Grow working is when people have had those messages early on when they needed to hear them, then they come back, and they're the people giving those messages to somebody else who may be 2 or 3 years behind in terms of the journey. So
yeah,
that's the really positive part, isn't it? That your experience now becomes somebody else's support.
yeah. You really have to give the program a few weeks, you know, to get started. You know, and the hope that it gives you is immense. You know, when you see other people who have come through, and you know, I no longer survive, I thrive.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was actually really kind
Wow.
of pulling myself through every day, and I am a battler, but like, there comes a point, a tipping point, whereby it became too much. Do you know what I mean? That I couldn't shoulder it any longer. I remember somebody in Grow said to me, gosh, you know, your shoulders like are just so down, you know, like you look bent down. Whereas now, like, I get up in the morning and I can't wait for the day to begin. Do you know, like, I just love my life. Do you know, thank God I'm happily married, and I've two beautiful boys. Do you
Yes.
know, and with Grow as well, you know what I mean? You have that family then support around you, you know, that you need. Like, it's very true that no person is an island. You know,
No.
we all need connections.
Yes.
You know, to feel disconnected because you're estranged
Yeah.
is a dangerous place to be. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? It's a dark place to be.
Yeah.
And Grow shines that light in your life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that God works out everything for good in the end. You know, when you move from a place of fear to a
Yeah.
place of faith. You know, I just found that for me, the growth program was all about change.
Yeah.
And in order to make that change, you have to open up. You have to share. You have to share the good and the bad, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
And by doing that, you know what I mean, you eventually come out the other side. You
Yeah.
know, and it's a continuous journey too. You know, step 11 being we grew daily closer to maturity. You know, that you know, you can't really get complacent either, as in you need to keep healthy in all aspects of your life, your physical, emotional, spiritual, you know, all of those things, you know,
Yeah.
to get the right sleep, to get the right food. And that's where the tasks in Grow become invaluable, because not only do you get a piece of the book every week or a wisdom to learn, you get a task. And if you focus yourself and do your task and be consistent at your meetings, it'll happen naturally. One day you'll start pinching yourself and say, is this really true?
Yeah.
Am I really becoming a better version or of your own self?
Yeah.
And it says in Grow that our true selves are happy self.
Yes.
That and when you kind of become, when you come from a place of control, and abuse and fear and pain and all of those things, that it's very important to move away from that and to start seeing your life from a different perspective and to resonate with good.
Yeah. And Karina, the two things that strike me from what you've said there, the first one is seeing your own children reach an age that was similar to when your brother passed, and how that probably opened that up again for you. Would that be right?
Yeah, she definitely triggered the youth aspect of and the innocence, and a child is a child, 16 years of age. And I suppose when you're looking back at a memory, a lot of my memories had been, I can't really explain the word, but it was only by being guided professionally that brought those memories back to the surface. Sometimes we cannot reach things without being guided.
Yes.
And seeing my sons, triggered, that aspect of it, the realization of how young he was. Do you know what I mean? And I suppose it brought up as well the guilt and shame that I didn't reach out for help at that point, for him or for myself or for anyone, but I too was a child. I was 15, and I understand that by looking at my sons. Do you know what I mean? And I didn't really understand that for a long time. I kind of felt that I should have been strong enough to speak out, or that.
Yeah.
But thankfully, you know what I mean, when you, and there comes in the piece of understanding. You only understand these things, a picture can tell 1,000 words.
Yes.
And when it's somebody who you love that's so close to you, like your own sons that you're looking at that age, it mirrors them. You kind of get not so much flashbacks, but it's definitely triggering. As in it.
Yeah.
And of course, some of the mannerisms of my boys would have been similar to their uncle. My brother had this thing of being able to shake his eyes really fast from side to side. One of my sons do that. And when he started to do it, I said, "Gosh, my brother used to do that."
Yeah.
And it does bring up then memories.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Of
But it also, in contrast, probably makes you face the difference in, although the age is the same, the environment your sons have grown up in is obviously very different to where yourself and your siblings were. So you've got that contrast of, this is what it could have been like or should have been like. So I think there's a new aspect of normality of what a family should have been like. But did that strike you? That
I suppose you learn from the mistakes. You learn the impact that parents have on children. They write on the slate of who they are, and it's a precious gift to rear a child.
Yes.
It's a precious gift to steer them through the good parts and the bad parts, particularly when they fall. To catch them when they fall. Just not to make it worse, but to help. And even when there's sibling rivalry, to cut it out. To not have favoritism. In families. To keep everybody equal and the same.
Absolutely.
And it was actually my husband's family that taught me a lot of that. He's one of 8 children, and they all have their scraps, and they're fabulous, though. You know what I mean? It's their normal family, as in, they fall out today and be happy tomorrow.
Yes.
And even the falling out would be very, very minor and minimal and fun, even. But they're a true family in the sense that they help each other and they pick each other up when they're down. You know, they have fun together, they meet up, and you know, I'm blessed to be part of that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, too, and it gives you the realization of how life can be.
Yes. Yes.
You know, you don't have to walk on eggshells.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to be somebody you're not, to be silent, to fit in. You know, like, and you just become your true self then. You know, you can be comfortable around people who accept you and trust you, and you know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah. And I suppose the other thing that struck me while you were speaking there, that I think I suppose family is so important in kind of the Irish setting. You know, it's such a huge piece that to finally kind of come to grips with that this family isn't good for you.
yeah,
You mentioned that you saw your grow group as a family, and that maybe, and your husband's family, that
yeah,
that became enough for you to be able to accept that I need to walk away from this other family who are not helping you to grow or to be at your
yeah.
best. Yeah.
And I suppose there was a certain shame element for that for me too in the beginning. You know, to say that, you know, your family don't want you or you're pushed away, and any time that I would have handed out an olive branch, you know, it was rejected. And I tried several times to make it better, but
That's
it
very
it
true.
just it just wasn't there. You know, we
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
and you know you just can't keep going back there too, because you're only going to cause more hurt and pain for
Mm-hmm.
yourself maybe and others. So
Mm-hmm.
the best thing, you know, as Ellen told me, is to treat it as permanent loss and let it go.
Yeah.
You know, and it was hard to hear at the time, but it was really the kernel truth. I didn't even know what estrangement was before I came to grow. I didn't even know there was a word for it.
Okay.
That's the truth. I
Yeah.
didn't. I thought it was a, you know, called conflict in a family, or, you know, I didn't have a label for it. I didn't understand it.
Yeah.
And therefore I couldn't read material on it,
Yes.
or, you know, that
Yeah.
I kind of felt that it was me who was the problem. You know, uh, you know, what have I done? Am I not enough?
I know.
You know, you begin to internalize it, which is very damaging to your identity and your self-esteem. Whereas when you realize that it's actually a family dysfunction, it's not just one person in it, it's the
Yeah.
dynamic of the family,
Yeah.
you know, and part of that can be sadly the leadership of the family too, or the lack of leadership in the family. And I just found that, you know, by understanding it and having I don't like things really that has labels, but it's strange enough in this particular case for me, by knowing it had a name, as in estrangement, it helped me to research it, understand it, you know, understand family functions, you
Mm-hmm.
know, roles in families,
Mm-hmm.
all of that. So, and it really does help you kind of in your own life as well. Nobody is perfect. We all make mistakes. So it kind of helps you not to make the same mistake again,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
and particularly around alcoholism, because alcoholism can be a trait that then follows down through families. Whereas I'm very thankful that I didn't marry an alcoholic,
Mm-hmm.
or I didn't go down that road myself.
Yeah.
You know, I'd enjoy a drink, but in moderation, do you know what I mean? And
Yes.
might have a blowout now and again, but very seldom, do you know,
Yeah.
that it's, you
Yes.
know, would be a party or going to, you know, a social event.
Yes.
But I'm just grateful that, you know, these things are flagged, particularly in Pieta House, they flagged it to me, you know, to be very careful that it can pass on down through,
Sure.
and not only just alcoholism, but traits of addiction
Of course.
can be passed down through,
Yeah.
and those insights are really helpful, you know. So
Absolutely. Yeah. So, well, Karina, I suppose the other thing that strikes me just before we finish up is when you talk about, I suppose, a time when you that time in your life you're driving to work and you feel the sickness in the pit of your stomach, and your family, your own family, are kind of young teenagers. And was there a pressure there to, I suppose, to get better for them as well as for yourself?
yeah, for sure. I felt a responsibility, and you know, you want your family, you want to be there for them. You know, you want to be healthy and well for them. But it wasn't so much a pressure, but a drive,
Good, right. Okay.
I would say.
Yeah.
It was a positive drive and a positive force. My own family are very supportive of me. You know, they know I attend Grow. I have a note on the door currently not to come into the room. They're very respectful of the confidential aspect of it. You know, I just find that they've been tremendous towards me. Um, and, you know, they get me, you know, and I get them, thankfully. And it really does kind of, they've been just such a support. And I've been really grateful to them.
Yeah.
You know, as much as I'm grateful to my Grow family as well, you know, they've truly been a family and a community to me. And you know, you kind of get a sense you could go into any Grow meeting, and because it's the same structure and the same routine, and just the people are genuinely very, very nice and caring, and
Yes.
you know, they're open, and um, they're objective and non-judgmental, which is a huge benefit
Yeah.
to you when you have to share difficult aspects of your own life. You know, and they're just tremendous. They give you courage just to keep going forward. And there's great progression and growth too, you know, that I've seen people become organisers and, you know, be part of national grow programs. And,
Yes.
you know, there's great progression
Yeah.
over the years.
Yeah.
Like I found as well that when we came onto Zoom, there was a new group starting up, and it, you know, they required seasoned growers, and I was
Yes.
able to help another group there, which was fantastic.
Brilliant.
And I find I joined Twitter over since COVID started.
Yeah.
You know, just I originally joined it to get news on COVID in the area here, just to keep an eye on case numbers and that type of thing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually find that every day I put up what I call thought for today, and it's usually Grow Wisdom. It's usually one of the Grow Wisdoms at the from the back of the book in the program, or something similar to it. But it gets a great reaction, great response, and it's a great way to help other people as well.
Brilliant.
You know, you find that those wisdoms stay with you,
Yeah.
in your daily life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is probably a question I should ask your husband or your family, but do you think that your husband noticed you change along that journey? So as you were doing all that work, I suppose with Grow and then with PA to House, and he obviously
Yeah.
can see the change in you, and
You're right, Sheila. Absolutely. You know, he would have seen the struggle. Now, I would have tried to protect him from a lot of that.
of course,
As in, whenever I attended an original family function or anything like that, uh, I didn't include him, and because I was in one sense I was trying to protect him from any of negativity, or you know, I
yeah,
didn't want him getting involved in it,
yeah,
or to try and keep him free from it as much as possible. Um, and not only that, but he would have seen me, you know, say, sit at my dressing table getting ready for work in the morning, and he'd nearly even sense my energy. I'd say, you know, he'd come over and he'd put his arm around me and give me a hug, and
yeah,
you know, and sometimes that can make you worse if somebody's kind to you, you know.
absolutely,
They say, just let me get on with it, you
yeah,
know. I
yeah,
just keep going, like.
yeah,
But he's extremely supportive, and he definitely gets the benefit now of you know, a more clearer and truer and happier me, you know, because I've a lot more energy. I'm not tired, you know. Um, you know, when I had the chest pain that went on for months, I was trying to find ways of trying to put it to cure it. You know, I'd be
yeah,
spraying, um, you know, like it's not Raljax, it's Biofreeze.
okay,
I was trying all sorts of stuff to try and release the muscles, or you know,
yeah,
and he'd see my struggle, and he'd get me a hot water bottle, and he'd see those things going on, and he'd see them from a different perspective too, because thankfully he's very happy in his family, you know what I mean? But
yes,
he would have seen that struggle, and he would have helped me a lot along the way. At Richard's 30th anniversary, we got a plaque, to put up at the site where he passed away at the river. And to me, it was a very special moment. And he actually heard a song in a car that was, somebody had the radio on in the vicinity, and it was a song that himself and my dad sang together at times. You know, it was The Boxer. And so, you know, he's seen the good, the bad as well. Do you know what I mean? As in,
Yes.
you know, and I wouldn't have had the strength or the courage to put up that plaque.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
until I actually went to Grow and went to Buy8 after that.
Brilliant.
Because it takes a certain amount of courage, because I'm not sure my family may not have agreed with doing that, you know.
Yeah.
But yet I felt it was important to acknowledge Richard's existence, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
His, you know, that God love him, that is where he passed away, you know what I mean? He had, you know, he struggled a lot.
Yes.
And you know, my husband, even though he wasn't there at the time, I would have opened up fully about my brother to him, you know what I
Yes.
mean, and shared
Yes.
that with him,
Yeah.
and he gets it.
He gets it.
Yeah.
Well, Karina, it's just been so lovely chatting to you, because as I said at the start, you're just unrecognizable, the person that you describe coming to Grow. And I know the way I came across you first was that I was your name, I was chatting to one of a young guy who joined one of our groups at the start of COVID, and he was struggling, and he mentioned to me that there was a lady called Carina who had come into the group and gave her testimony, and that I think there was 6 or 7 young people in that group that have really benefited from hearing your story and seeing how far you've come. And you were almost like I had to seek you out and find who is this lady who made such a difference to those young people that came to us when they were struggling at just as COVID started. So I suppose that's really the reason we got together this morning to do this video, was to put it up on our YouTube channel, and hopefully there'll be many more who will listen to your story and maybe realise that they will be they would be better off kind of doing the work and facing any issues that they have, that as you say, the lowest ebb is the turning of the tide, and you're just such a great example of how life can get better. So thank you so much for
Thanks very
chatting.
much, Sheila. It's lovely talking to you.